Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Mirror of Intimacy's monthly webinar on Mirror of Intimacy, Daily Reflections on Emotional and Erotic Intelligence. I'm Dr. Alexandra Katehakis, Clinical Director of Center for Healthy Sex, and today is Monday, April 5th, 2021. And in fact, when I glanced at my calendar this morning, I saw that today is called Easter Monday. And when I think about Easter, I think about resurrection, and that's a big word, but I do think it's related to truth in some way. So let's keep that in mind as we think about truth, the times we've told untruths, and this notion of resurrecting, of being becoming anew, let's put it that way, being different as we change and grow over time, not necessarily in a religious sense, but in a more secular sense of the meaning of some of these religious stories. And so let's hold that lightly as we start. I want to remind you that if you have any questions or thoughts, that you can type them into the Q&A box, and I'll be able to answer those directly. If you want to ask questions anonymously, you can send them to Melisa in the chat box, and she'll relay them to me. So our quote today is from a famous American playwright, Eugene O'Neill. He writes, "None of us can help the things life has done to us. None of us can help the things that life has done to us. They're done before you realize it. And once they're done, they make you do other things until at last everything comes between you and who you'd like to be and what you'd like to be. And you've lost your true self forever." So that's a very powerful statement that O'Neill is making. And the first one is that we cannot help what life has done to us. No one gets out of this thing alive. And we're all headed for the same destination, I like to say. So keep that in mind, that life is going to knock us around, buffet us around. We are going to have scrapes and bruises and scars from this experience called life. It's messy business, whether you are fully in your addiction, or you are in recovery or on a path of self-awareness or a spiritual path, whatever you want to call it. Even that is messy business. This doesn't just all of a sudden, you snap your fingers and it smooths out and nothing bad befalls you. And when these bad things happen, they're done before we realize it. It's done before we realize it. We don't even see it coming sometimes. If you've ever been in a car accident, if you've ever gotten sick, if you've ever done something stupid and you didn't really see the consequences coming, it's done before you realize it. And once those things are done, they make you do other things. And those other things can either be leaning into the truth, leaning into making what's wrong right, or they can have us lying and not telling the truth. But once those things are done, they make us do other things until at last everything comes between you and what you'd like to be. So that reminds me of the quote from Shakespeare, where Shakespeare said, "Oh, what tangled webs we weave when first we practice to deceive." And once that deception starts, it starts to roll like a tumbleweed, and it gets worse and worse over time. And then we no longer are who we'd like to be. And then you've lost your true self forever. He writes, you've lost your true self forever. And this process of recovery, this process of being on a path of self-awareness or a spiritual path, is about bringing ourselves home to the truth of who we are. And when we get glimpses of that, we know it to be true. It's very, very clear. When we become more integrated, more whole, then we know that we're on a path to true truth, if that's such a thing. So one of the definitions of truth is the body of real things, events, and facts. The body of real things, events, and facts. And so it's the actuality of what's going on, that this is actually a chair that I'm sitting in. That is a fact. It's the truth. Somebody could try to convince me otherwise. And if I'm in a dysfunctional relationship, they may do so. But the truth is that this is a concrete item that I'm sitting on. And when you are in accord with the facts or with reality, then you're in your truth. And oftentimes we get into relationships where people distort our truths and we get confused and we lose our compass, our North Star, if you will. And so the challenge is another definition of truth is fidelity to a standard. How do I stand faithful to my standards, to my truths, so that I'm paying attention to what the person is saying, but also what they're doing, more importantly, because another definition of truth is sincerity in action, character, and utterance. Sincerity in action, not just what someone's saying, in character, are they congruent with who they say they are? And in utterance, are they congruent in what they say and what they do? And these standards hold true for ourselves also. We can't hold other people to standards of truth if we don't hold ourselves to that first and foremost. Because when we do, when we see people that are ill, they're not well, they're dysfunctional or sick in their disease of alcoholism or addiction, then we, care about them, we give them compassion, but we don't hang around for their distortions that ultimately hurt ourselves. So think about finally that truth is a transcendent, fundamental, or spiritual reality. Now, what does that mean, a transcendent, fundamental, or spiritual reality? This is something that I've been incredibly interested in exploring recently, especially this last year when I've had lots of time to ponder these more esoteric ideas. But there is this knowing when we come home to ourselves. We can call it a spiritual reality. We can call it a quantum reality. We can start to notice that things exist beyond what we can feel and touch and taste and smell, that there is an implicate order that takes place, one that we cannot see, but that we know deeply to be true. And this plays out in our intuition. When synchronicity happens in our lives, which happens all the time if we're paying attention, when we start to see the order of things, and when we're living by this fundamental or spiritual or transcendent reality, we don't waver from what we know to be true. And one of the surest ways to access this is through the body, to really ask yourself, what am I feeling about this right now? If I have to make a decision, am I making a decision from my head trying to figure it out? Or am I really listening to my heart? Am I really listening to what's true for me? So remember that while we have to be true to ourselves in order to attract people that are truthful, we have to be very careful about self deception, because self deception exists in nature. It's a fundamental survival mechanism. Um, and it exists so that we can lie to other people. That I cannot lie to you if I'm not deceiving myself first. So if I'm telling myself it's not that bad, or no one will get hurt if they don't know what I'm doing, or it's just this one time, or it's a lie by omission, all of these things are about self deception. And that self deception then will have me much more easily lying to you. And somewhere along the way, we learned that if we deny our personal truth, then we're safe in the world. And this typically happens when children grow up on caregivers that are unsafe and sometimes downright dangerous. So, if as a child you learn early on that you are going to be neglected or worse, or just as bad, I suppose, beat or injured in some ways if you tell the truth, then you stop telling the truth. So, it's kind of a classic trope in our culture is, stop crying. If you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about, which is just such a cruel statement to a child. But that message teaches the child that it's unsafe to tell a personal truth. It's unsafe to cry and say, I'm scared, or I need help, or I need comfort, because that only renders more violence against me. And that then is going to have the child start to lie about life, interpret life differently, make things up, and starts to shuttle and shift their reality in ways that become distorted. And so lying, and sometimes pathological lying, becomes a survival mechanism over time. And this abuse of truth then can lead to increasingly more antisocial behaviors of, well, why not break the rules? Why not lie about this? Why not steal and cheat and cut corners and take shortcuts in order to get what I want because I've been so fundamentally deprived? Now, these are not usually conscious thoughts. And there's even a saying in the 12-step programs that there is no easier, gentler path, which is a workaround. If I can just work around the 12 steps, if I can just work around doing the work that I'm being advised to do, whether it's by a sponsor or a therapist, because I just want to get this over with and I want to get it done quickly and I want to be better fast. I want to be cured, in fact. All of that is a fallacy and it's a lie that we tell ourselves because anything worth having is worth fighting for. And these are not the messages we get in our culture. We are living in a culture of immediate gratification, a culture of greed that tells us we can buy our way out of anything, a culture that is all about shortcuts and moving quickly. And life doesn't move that way at all. Um, there are books that, talk about how to make money quickly. Or I think there was a book once called Do What You Love and the Money Will Come. But no one told you how long it was going to take before the money came. That could be a lifetime of endeavor. So there is an immediate gratification, and there's a quickening in our culture about that also, where people don't stay at jobs very long. They think that they can glean a level of mastery quickly, which is an oxymoron. And we get tired sometimes with the day-to-day grind, the day in and day out. But sometimes we have to think about that as, water over stones, as they say in Eastern cultures, that constant water going over the stone is always shining and honing and rounding off the edges on that stone until it glistens with an incredible beauty. But that can take nature a long time to get there, just like it takes us a long time to fully realize who we are, to be in this place of sincerity, of being a truth teller, of walking in this fundamental integrity. So I want you to really hear how important it is to not give up on coming home to yourself, on discovering the truth of who you are. So we have a question or a statement here. Stephen writes, almost a year ago, I confronted my father about the sexual abuse he perpetrated on me. I suppressed these memories my whole life. He denied my memories of the act. I've had a boundary of no communication with him since I'm at the crossroads of knowing my truth and his denial. I want a relationship with him. What do I do with this conflict of my truth and his? Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you on staying true to yourself and what your experience was. And it's very, very important that you trust the process, that if your intention is to have a relationship with him again, you will. But you cannot leapfrog the rage, the pain, the hurt, the upset that he inflicted on you, whether he ever admits to it or not. Your body knows what's true, your intuition, your instinct. I had similar experiences come to me in my own therapy, and they were never what we call implicit or declarative memories. I don't have a clear memory of something like I do about my first day of kindergarten, which is very clear in my head, or what I ate, the dessert I ate this weekend, which is very clear in my head. But there was a bodily based knowing of something that went sideways, something wasn't right. And it's maddening in the beginning because these memories are both repressed and dissociated. These are two different parts of the brain, if you will. Repression is not being able to remember what we know happened. We know it, but we can't remember it, but it's very close to the surface. Whereas dissociation is we don't even know what we don't even know, and that lives much deeper in the body. And so you will probably have images, flashes of colors, moments, feeling states. Some might come up for you around being sexual, but you have to just trust this process, Stephen. Consider that it's sort of like, pulling a thread. And sometimes when you pull threads, they sort of jerk. They don't really unravel the way they want us to. And other times they just unravel rapidly and beautifully, usually when we don't want them to, when we pull on a shirt or something. So be very, very kind to yourself about how long this process is going to take you before you are clear about what your truth is. And along the way, have compassion for your father's distortion, because it's highly likely that someone abused him along the way. These are typically intergenerational transmissions of trauma. No one just pops out an offender. We are offended upon, and it's our job, people like you, people that are on this call, people that are in these conversations, which I think there are an army of today, where we are working to evolve our consciousness to say the buck stops here. And so trust the process, be kind to yourself, be compassionate for your father, and don't rush anything. Be willing to not know and see what happens. So, yes, I think you're saying that you feel sad that he didn't meet you, but you have to remember that he cannot meet you. He can't meet you right now. His shame is way too intense. And everyone who's had any experience with trauma or abuse or drug or alcohol addiction or sex addiction or any addiction knows how powerful shame can be. So it doesn't mean that he gets a hall pass, but it does mean that you have to deal with your disappointment and recognize that he is in a great deal of shame right now. So Jim asks, how does one begin the process of regaining integrity when they've been so good at lying to themselves and practicing the self-deception you were talking about? Well, first of all, I would recommend that you get yourself a little notebook, like a flip book, those little flip notebooks, and write down your lies every single day. So every time you say you like something and you don't, or you don't care what you're eating and that's not true, or, someone asks you if, that's your pen they left on your desk and you lie about that, just keep a catalog of your lies and start to notice how often you lie, and then start to challenge yourself with why you lie. And that's a deeper investigation typically that's useful in therapy. But you're lying to yourself first and foremost, and you're hiding from something. And that's probably something you learned a long time ago. There are a couple of books that have been written about deception and self-deception that you can find on Amazon if you look around. But when you talk about being good at lying, why did you have to get good at lying? And what do you have to do to get good at telling the truth? And this is going to be a whole different level of vulnerability for you. And so your shame is going to be at issue, your terror of rejection. But really making yourself vulnerable is what is demanded of you if you really want to make this change. Someone writes, I'm curious if you can speak to the impact of caregivers who are overbearing versus neglecting, the quote, silver spoon spoiling and enabling, as well as nosy type of parents who do everything to their kids well into adulthood. This is the type of family I come from. I was also sexually abused by a close family, friends, which I eventually told my family, who did immediately cut off those friends. I believe both of these things have played a role in my addiction. Well, I think that's true. That sort of invasiveness is a form of enmeshment, and it steals a child's autonomy and their developing sense of self and positions you in a way where you can never ever leave home. And it's incredibly crippling, is what it is, because you don't get to formulate an adult self. You don't get to trip and fall. And then there becomes this dialectic where, as an adult, you are so dependent now on these invasive caregivers that you're afraid to give them up because you don't know what to do. And so I would recommend that you look at some of the work by Ken Adams. He wrote a book called Silently Seduced, which is about this kind of covert incest. And he also wrote a book called When He's Married to Mom. And you would do well to track his work and start to look at the ways you can get out of this enmeshment. This also aligns with the notion of codependency. And so I would point you in the direction of the codependency literature also, and look at that material. But one of the first things you have to be willing to do is to cut these people off and tell them you won't be taking their calls every day. Maybe you'll call or talk to them once a week. You have to stop taking their money and their advice, and you have to start doing things for yourself. So you're going to have to slowly start to stand on your own 2 feet again. I'm trying to find a way to be empathic for my wife. How would your treatment program fit for a person who's been in recovery for 2 years, yet struggling in a relationship with my wife? I still get defensive. I'm not sure I understand the nature of that question. I suppose if you cheated on her and betrayed her, um, then you need to consider why you're getting defensive and why you don't have empathy for her pain and her hurt. And my guess is you're not really making a living amends to her, if she's really still angry like this. Okay, what do you suggest for dealing with the secret for years? A secretive interfamily affair. I've been told that raising this issue within my family is not worth it, but is still continue to haunt me personally. Well, that is a question that I think probably has a lot of context behind it, and I don't know what that context is. And so it sounds like this is a secret that's inside the family. And sometimes this is a case where adult kids know that a parent had an affair, but the parents don't know that the kid knows, but the kid tells another family member and it gets back to the parents. And it's just a mess. And the person who knows about it, but who has not, really come forward with it or confronted any of the parties has to live with this toxic shame. This is what Pia Mellody calls carried shame, I think. And so to say it's not worth it to confront the other person is something worth investigating. I would ask you, and again, these are just self-reflexive questions, but to ask yourself, what is my expectation? What's the purpose of bringing this forward in the family? What will it do for me? What will it do for the other people? So you really have to evaluate what the upside is for everybody concerned and what the downside is. And you can't expect that if you confront anybody with a secret or a lie, that they're all of a sudden going to see the light in the way that Stephen was talking about confronting his father about his abuse. Our fantasy is that the abusers are going to say, I'm so sorry, and, break down in front of you and tell you how horrible they were and they wish they'd never done that. And is there anything at all they can do? That would be an incredibly enlightened response. But unfortunately, most people who do these sorts of things have not done their own work, so they can't give that response. But there's something powerful about letting people know that you know, because you're giving them back the shame that you're carrying, and you can't expect anything more than that. So see if you can evaluate, what it is that you're hoping for and what your expectations are. Someone writes, how do I rebuild trust with my wife after multiple years of online cheating and masturbation? She wants no masturbation or porn. I can give up porn and other fantasies, but masturbation's been really hard to stop. again, I think this is circumstantial for you. And, I would be wondering if you're having sex with your partner. And if you're having sex with your partner, then why the need to masturbate? And if you're not, what purpose does masturbation serve for you? And how does that keep you separate from your partner? Obviously, if you haven't had sex for 17 years with your partner, and masturbation's your only form of sex life, then that's a very different conversation. So I think it's essential that you get clear with what it is you want and what you're doing. And are you in this together with your partner, or are you both living separate lives? So we've been talking about family of origin issues and how gaslighting plays out in these family of origin issues, and how people in recovery from addiction have also gaslit some of their partners and family members by lying about what was going on when it wasn't going on. And so it's painful and crazy making to be lied to if you've ever been on the receiving end of it. It's incredibly painful because we don't know what our reality is. And sometimes the depth and breadth of lying can really be quite diabolical. Some of it is intentional, some of it is not. But either way, it's essential to look at where we've all lied to other people. And when we do that, how our past keeps playing out in the present moment over and over and over again. And so, can you look at your lies, and can you look at the ways that you can clean them up? So, in order to confront our own self-deception and our own lies, we really have to get through our defenses. And these are typically ego defenses, if you will. They're left brain defenses. They're the ways that we justify and rationalize and minimize and tell ourselves, one of my favorite ones is, I don't want to hurt the other person, which is, just so distorted, because if you've been lying and cheating on someone, or embezzling money, or doing any number of things behind a person's back, you've already hurt them. So this idea that if I tell them the truth, it's going to hurt them is not true. The actual truth of that is that I'm afraid that I can't handle the truth. I'm afraid of the consequences of that person's rage, their ire, their pain, their just exasperation at how horrible I've been. And so that's what I really don't want to deal with. Other people can handle the truth. And so it's important to look at the ways that we deceive ourselves and how we obscure reality, if you will, by not wanting to be truthful with others. And that goes with lying by omission, or implying a lie through careful wording that obscures the truth, where we're not exactly explicit with what's going on, or we're just not saying what's going on, which is the lie by omission. Or we can silence our truth because we're scared and we're still trying to find the right way to share it with someone. And it's good to look at that, because all of that is typically bound up in shame. The shame that you feel in your very body, in your bones, the shame that silences you because it harkens back to a childhood again where it was dangerous to be truthful. But the other saying that came to my mind this morning when I was looking at this topic is that the truth will set you free. The truth will set you free. And even though it's painful, the consequences might just be horrendous. There's something about unburdening our very soul. And our soul, I think, is connected to our autonomic nervous system, the body, the tension we hold in our body. We know when we feel open-hearted, when we feel free. We'll say, my soul feels free. The times that I can spend in the ocean on a warm, sunny day feels like my soul is just, in flight, because my body is so relaxed. And so carrying lies, secrets, are like having a chronic, pebble in your shoe that just gets rawer and rawer over time. So someone's asking here, I'm in my first sober relationship in 5 years. Congratulations. And my partner consistently triggers my emotional anorexia, avoidance, and a fear of engulfment. Aha. Instead of burying and repressing my feelings, I've practiced being honest about how I'm feeling, which is something I never did before recovery. But this often triggers my partner and causes her to fly off the handle and want to cut and run. We've moved through some of these arguments, but it's very challenging. Based on this information, is there any hope for this relationship with this approach to truth telling? I would say yes. And I would say that your partner is really struggling with regulating herself. And she's taking everything that you say personally, which means that she has not done enough of her own work. So, for example, if you were to be truthful with me and say, look, Alex, there's something I have to tell you right now. It's really bothering me, but I don't want to avoid the truth. But I can't stand that shirt you have on. It's just making me dizzy. The patterns freak me out. My mother wore a shirt like that when she beat me, and I cannot hear you. And I can't say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that, or I forgot. That's right. She wore patterned shirts when she beat you. You know what? I'm just going to get rid of this shirt. I love it. It was a gift from my mother, but you know what? I'm just going to give it away. It doesn't mean that much to me. So now I'm with you. I'm hearing you. I'm not collapsing into making it all about me. If I made it all about me, I'd be saying, you're crazy. This is not the same shirt your mother wore. You need to get over it. And it makes me feel like you don't love me or you don't think I'm attractive. And I thought this shirt looked great on me. And if what you're hearing here is all about me, it's me, me, me. It's not about me hearing you and listening to you and what you need. And while it may pain me to give this shirt away, the pain is not as great as caring for you because I'm in this relationship to have secure functioning. But if I constantly collapse into a narcissistic state of it being all about me and my pain, then there's no place for this to go. So I think it's important that both of you start to take responsibility for your experience. When you get triggered, yes, you're triggering each other. That's what relationships do. And that's why relationships are a great opportunity to heal our attachment strategies. But both parties have to be responsible for what their part is in it. If every time somebody gets angry at somebody or hurt, the other person threatens to leave, that's really threatening the very foundation of the relationship, which is not okay. So there's hope for this relationship if the two of you can start to do something different. There is not if you keep running these same patterns, because you will run right out the door because the relationship just can't take it. I mean, you keep shredding the foundation of the relationship. And the truth is, love is not enough. We really have to share the same value systems. And if we value truth telling, if we value dealing with our issues, no matter how painful or raw or embarrassing or shameful they are, then we can come to some close in understanding. And that close in understanding is really what I would call intimacy. And that intimacy creates novelty in the brain, which makes us more sexually attracted to each other. And it's weird to think that getting through an argument constructively makes us more attractive. But what it does is it allows us to know each other more deeply if we're really interested. Otherwise, we can just shut the conversation down by shaming and blaming the other person and saying, well, you're just weird, or you just need to get over that, or that's what you always do. Instead of really understanding, why is it that my partner always does that? Where does that come from? And it's never going to go away, by the way, some of these things. It's just how it is. So, can I be in acceptance with that? Can I live with that? And if I can't, then I need to leave instead of badgering my partner day in and day out about that thing. So, that was a long answer to your question, but I hope that was helpful. So, spiritual truth, whatever its shape is, whatever form it comes in, whether it is through meditation practice or a religion, or your interest in physics and the world beyond which we can see, is the model for how you measure what's true for you. So, what is the shape of your spiritual truth, of your reality? What form does it come in? How is it, or when is it that you know for certain? Um, is what I think you have to really dial into to understand what this matter of truth is for you. And when we heal the trauma of having been lied to, we could call that trauma psychological, intellectual, or emotional abuse, then we can align with our living truth. So if we have been the betrayer, then we really have to reconcile the chronic lying and why we did what we did and how we've made a living amends. And if you've been on the receiving end of that lying and that betrayal, you have to find some way of aligning yourself with what your truth is. And maybe that has to do with forgiveness. Maybe you can't forgive. Maybe you forgive but you don't forget, but you have to reckon with it one way or the other. And it's up to you to figure out what that is. There's so many prescribed ways of doing things today, but in the world of our psyche and our heart and our spirit, there's no book for that. You really have to find it yourself. You have to dive deeply into yourself and get very, very quiet and find out what the truth is for you there, because you have all the answers internally if you just get quiet enough to listen. And that model of sincerity will enable all of us to recognize what's true in other people. So when you are truthful with yourself, when you are really grounded in what your portal is to the truth, how you know it, then you will start to speak it, and then you will recognize it in other people as well. So listen to your heart, as I said, because you know what to do. So there's another question or statement here. My wife wants to know all of my triggers every day. Many men in program have said I should not share every time I see a woman in public I'm attracted to, but when I see a woman and feel attracted and triggered and don't tell my wife, I feel like I'm lying, but fear that could destroy our relationship. So you have to have an agreement about that with her. I can't tell you what you can and can't and should and shouldn't do with her. But I think there is a very big question here for partners about what good it does to hear these triggers all day, every day, because it's incredibly painful to hear that. And these are firing patterns in the brain. They're really not that interesting. They're not personal. They have very little, if anything, to do with you, other than you will compare yourself to it. You will drive yourself crazy, make yourself crying, sick, you name it, by hearing this all day long. And so that is what a program is for. And you, whoever's in recovery, it's your responsibility to make sure that you are making 4 or 5 calls a day, that you're getting to a meeting every day, that you are reporting to people in your program what you're thinking, who you're triggered by, what your fantasies are, who you objectified, what your euphoric recall is. I mean, all of that in my thinking, no offense, is just garbage that's in your head. Because if you've been looking at porn, or you've been involved in sex in a way that's pathological for years, of course that those are the thoughts your brain's going to think. If you've been studying Spanish for years, you'll be thinking in Spanish. So you have to consider that this has been what you have done to train your brain. And the abstinence model of the S programs is to stop looking at all that material so that you can take a deep breath, and so that those habituated patterns can start to die off. And they do over time, but you can't keep going back to them and expect that they're going to die off. And reporting them to your partner day in and day out is really exhausting for both parties, and I don't think is particularly healthy. But you have to decide with your wife, and hopefully a qualified couples therapist, what your agreement is about secrets and lies. And then you have to have a solid program where you're reporting the contents of your head to someone in the program who can help you with that. So let's look at what acts you can do today. So when you share your truth, ask yourself if your words are secondary to your behavior, or are you really walking the talk? That's the question. Because someone in a rage, ends up speaking their truth when he or she is enraged. And that is an unfortunate way to have the truth come out because it's really painful. And the person who's in the rage is in a very regressed state. So, why not be honest when you have your prefrontal cortex online, when you're reasonable, when you can be kind, when you can hear the other person's pain, and do it from a place of healing rather than a place of destruction? And then, do you dispute others' version of reality and thus fail to hear what's true for them? You don't have to agree, but see if you can hear the other person's truth. So that's like the example I was giving before, where someone was saying that rather than avoid um, and deal with their avoidance or enmeshment, they're trying to be honest with their partner, and then their partner can't hear it. That is problematic. So practice not only walking your talk, but being able to listen and manage your anxiety while you're listening. Don't make it about you. Don't make it about your looks or how sexy you are or whether you're good enough or anything else. Just see if you can listen in a very receptive way, and pay attention to what you're hearing. And then, with whom do you share your truth on a daily basis when you're stuck with someone who can't receive your truth and you're stuck in a relationship that's not genuine? So, who are the people who can genuinely hear your truth? Are they friends? Are they close friends? Are they people in your 12-step program, perhaps? So find someone that can really hear your truth and not judge you, but just listen and give feedback if you want it. This is why I'm a huge fan of group therapy, because that's an unbelievably great way to start to build these practices of truth telling and intimacy. And finally, what's your spiritual truth right now? What are you noticing or feeling as you're listening to this conversation? What do you notice in your body? Does it feel like what I'm saying resonates as the truth for you? Have you found another way into what your spiritual truth is? So, no matter what your spiritual truth is, embrace it and seek to uncover it throughout your day and throughout all the events that come towards you on this and any given day. And in that way, you'll start to walk in the light, and be fearless about telling the truth, because the truth hurts. It does sometimes, or we're disappointed. But at least you're not carrying around a bag of secrets and lies on your back that ultimately break your back and make you sick and hurt everyone around you. All right. So on this fifth day of April, on Easter Monday, whatever that means to all of you, I'm delighted to have been able to have this conversation about truth with you. And I wish you well. And I hope the spring brings you all sorts of ideas of resurrection and experiences of resurrection, especially as we move and unfurl out of this last year of so much pain and so much loss. All right, take good care, and I'll see you in May.